Hello and welcome back to another episode of the For the Property Investor podcast. And we're here with the weekly news, and what a week of news it's going to be. And of course, the man that's brought us that news is Nick Bendel. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you for having me, Owen. Great to be here.
Yes, I'm glad it's great to be here because it is great. But we've got some great stories that you've brought us this week, but some great news. But before we get into that, what's been happening in your world for the past week?
I had a very interesting week, shall we say. My company, Hunter and Scribe, are a copywriting agency. We write content for finance businesses throughout Australia. We work with quite a few financial advisors and got a very nice 5-star Google review from one of our financial advisor clients. We were struggling for a long time to give our clients interesting financial news. Either it was too technical or dull. After working with Hunter and Scribe, I'm proud to say that our presentations are insightful and fun. We get great feedback from our clients. I highly recommend Hunter and Scribe. That was one of the highlights of my week.
Fantastic. Well, I'm glad you always do great work for your clients, Nick. But yes, here at Leafield, of course, we're a national property management business. We've just been doing more of the same, which is getting properties leased all over the country, well, in 5 states at least, and bringing on new managements and get everything done that we need to for our clients. But Nick, let's get into the news, shall we?
Yes, this week, all 3 stories are going to be about the recent federal budget. Let's begin with government restricts negative gearing to new builds. The federal government will significantly scale back negative gearing for established residential property under changes announced in the budget. Investors who buy established residential properties will no longer be able to use rental losses to reduce other taxable income, including salary and wages. The change applies to all investment properties purchased after budget night, although the new accounting measures will start from 1 July 2027. However, existing investors will be largely protected, as properties held before the budget announcement will retain access to negative gearing until sold. The negative gearing changes do not apply to qualifying new builds. Dwellings constructed on vacant land and developments that replace existing homes with a greater number of dwellings will continue to qualify for negative gearing, reinforcing the government's focus on increasing housing supply. Owen, keen to get your thoughts. What do you think of the government's decision to eliminate negative gearing for investors who buy established homes in the future?
Well, it wasn't really a surprise that they were going to start fiddling with it, but it's not really too big a deal. It's for most investors out there that are buying, they're not too concerned about negative gearing benefits. It's a bonus if they get them, and most sophisticated investors that own many multiple properties are almost not interested at all. If they get it, it's up to their accountant to get them any further tax deductions. But going out there primarily looking for negative gearing benefits, it's not a big deal at all. You'll still be able to carry forward your losses against the future property income, and which you have to do in a company structure as well, which is what a lot of sophisticated investors do, buying in a company structure or in their super fund. So really buying in those better structures are just going to become more popular for those sophisticated investors. And what they're going to do is they're going to scare away the little guy who's just trying to get 1 or 2 investment properties for their family and for their future to just get ahead. And so really the people that they're trying to look after, they're going to hurt the most. So it wasn't really needed. It's not going to have a huge benefit to anyone. And Yeah, even existing properties that are going to continue to have that benefit, that the benefit really only lasts for in any significant amount for the first 5 years of ownership of an investment property. And then maybe in that sort of second 5 years, you might still get some benefits. It depends on how well you've bought. If you've bought poorly, then yes, you might have to take advantage of those negative gearing benefits for a lot longer. So, if anything, it's going to make investors be better investors.
Okay, well, one of the points the government made when announcing these changes is that the old negative gearing rules were unfair because leverage investors were able to receive greater tax advantages than those available to owner occupiers. Was that a fair point?
Um, it's a point, but it's really not a relevant point. For what they were trying to achieve, like there was absolutely nothing in the in the budget that benefits who they were targeting the budget towards, which was the worker just trying to get ahead and the younger people getting into their first home. There was nothing in the budget that made a difference to them at all.
I'm wondering how investors are going to react to this. You've already touched upon it, but just give me a bit more information. Do you think fewer new investors are going to enter the market? Will a greater share of future investors buy new rather than established properties? How do you think things will play out?
Well, it's I think once everyone gets their heads around it and they get the advice from their professional advisors, it's not really going to make much difference at all. You can still invest and get lots of benefits, whether you're buying brand new. But if you're buying for the benefits, then you're probably buying wrongly anyway. It's if you want to buy a brand new property because it's a good investment and you get tax benefits at the same time, then that's a bonus. That's a good thing. But if you're only buying a brand new property because you get the tax benefits and it's got no other advantage from an investment point of view, then it's probably not the best property for you to buy. But getting advice, proper advice about the right structure to buy in, if that becomes more popular, then that'll be great for everyone.
The budget also made a significant change to CGT, and that's the subject of our second story.
Mm.
Budget replaces 50% CGT discount with indexation model. The federal government has announced a major overhaul of Australia's capital gains tax system, replacing the long-standing 50% CGT discount with a new inflation index model from 1 July 2027. Under the changes, individuals and trusts will instead calculate capital gains using inflation indexation of an asset's cost base, alongside a new 30% minimum tax rate on real capital gains. The government said the current system does not accurately account for inflation and may encourage investment decisions driven by tax outcomes rather than economic productivity. The reforms would return Australia to a system more closely resembling the indexation model that operated before 1999. The changes will only apply to gains accrued after 1 July 2027. Gains accrued before that date will continue to receive the existing 50% discount. Investors purchasing eligible new builds will be able to choose between the current CGT discount and the new indexation and minimum tax system. So, Owen, what do you think of the government's changes to the CGT rules?
Pure tax grab, Nick. And it's just pure tax grab. We're the most highly taxed country now for capital gains tax. It's yeah, yeah. I mean, between that and the changes they've made to NDIS to cut down on the fraud, they still couldn't pull out a surplus for us.
We'll get to that in a moment.
All right. So I'll save that for later. But I mean, seriously, I mean, what are they doing? But in terms of the CGT rules, Um, yeah, it's the worst one of all is the capital gains tax changes will apply to all assets. It's not just property. And the small business owner who works for 20 years, um, worked for 20 years, and most of those years they pay their staff, they underpay themselves, and some years they don't even pay themselves a cent. And they actually borrow money and lose money to put into the business to keep the business alive, to be able to pay employees. And then once they do have a windfall at the end when they sell the business, then the government's going to be charging them anywhere up to 47 cents in the dollar. I mean, that's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. So, yeah, it's the small business owner that I really feel sorry for in this case. But yeah, it's in terms of property, yeah, it's a pure tax grab. And I mean, pre 1985, we never had any capital gains tax in this country. And they're abolishing that. If you still keep a property that you've owned, you'll have to pay CGC on it after 1 July next year. And yeah, so it's yes, they've changed it back to an indexation, but you still have to pay minimum 30%. So it's yeah, the higher of the two. So yeah, it's really quite disappointing.
Okay, so you've said that this CGT change was a tax grab. Given that Anthony Albanese and Jim Chalmers are loyal listeners of this podcast, I want to come to their defense. The government said the introduction of the 30% minimum tax rate on real capital gains will make it harder for investors to game the system. And that's because it will reduce the benefit of investors deferring capital gains realization to years where their marginal tax rates were low and ensure their gains are subject to a tax rate closer to the rate they face during their working life. Doesn't the government have a point with that?
How do you mean?
So I think they're suggesting that instead of taking decisions, say during your working life when you might be on the top tax bracket, you might wait until you're retired when you're on a lower tax bracket and then dispose of these assets.
Oh, you mean so you've worked hard your whole life, you've paid tax, and you put a little money away so that you could invest it and grow something for your retirement, and then yeah, try to maximize that in your retirement. Yeah, yeah. I mean, is there any incentive in this country anymore to be able to get ahead by saving and investing? I mean, seriously, it's they want to push everyone to the point where there's no incentive to work hard in this country anymore
Okay,
under
well,
this system.
let me again come to the government's defense. They made the point that the negative gearing changes we talked about earlier and the CGT changes would together level the playing field for first home buyers because they'll now face less competition from investors. Do you think that's how things are going to play out?
No, not at all. It's it could have the opposite effect because if an investor is out there trying to get into a property and they had to use the negative gearing benefits to be able to buy that, say, $700,000 or $800,000 property. And a lot of the time, those negative gearing benefits could actually help them borrow that extra $50,000 or $100,000 to be able to get to that price point. So if they then have to start looking at lower price properties, guess who they'll be competing more with? It'll be the first home buyers. So it's yeah, they're trying to fiddle with something they're just gonna let it stuff up. Every time this government fiddles with something, they stuff it up, and they're doing it again. There was absolutely nothing in the budget that was going to help first home buyers at all. Absolutely nothing. It's investors will always find something to invest in, and it's and if they can't buy that investment property because there's no negative gearing benefits that'll help them buy it, then they'll go look at something else. Or they'll look at a different type of investment that pays them a higher income, higher yield, and manages to help them borrow that little bit more. So they'll be the creative ones. At the end of the day, if there's not enough properties out there to be able to satisfy the market of both first home buyers, upgraders who are selling and then buying again, as well as investors, then prices are going to go up no matter what. No matter what they do to capital gains tax, or no matter what they do to negative gearing benefits, if there's not enough supply, properties are always going to go up.
Okay, well, in our first two stories, you have given a few whacks to the government, but I think you're going to come around and be a bit more supportive with our third and final story, which is Chalmers boasts about economic management, but forecasts rising debt. Despite finding savings in the budget, the federal government expects our fiscal position to be largely unchanged. Previously, forecasts showed we would run a deficit equivalent to 1.3% of GDP this financial year, followed by deficits of 1.1% in each of the three following years. Now, forecasts suggest a deficit of 1% this financial year, followed by deficits of 1% in each of the three following years. During that time, gross debt as a share of GDP will rise from 33.1% in the 2026 financial year to 35.8% in the 2029 financial year. Treasurer Jim Chalmers said, "Responsible economic management is a defining feature of this government, and this budget is our most responsible yet." Chalmers added, "Australia remains one of only 9 countries with a AAA sovereign credit rating from all 3 major ratings agencies and has lower gross debt than every major advanced economy." So, Owen, Jim Chalmers has forecast ongoing budget deficits. At the same time, we are in a difficult economic environment. So should we give Chalmers a pass mark for his economic management?
No, and like he's comparing himself to the poor cousins from the other side of the tracks. How about comparing ourselves to where we were 20 years ago when we had zero debt as a federal government? How about that? What about all the money they've wasted by borrowing and spending it on frivolous things? And what about the exceedingly high amount of spending that they just can't seem to cut? They have to raise taxes so that they can afford to just make a small budget deficit. It's ridiculous.
Well, focusing more on these forecasts or digging a bit deeper into the forecast, Treasury is suggesting economic growth will be 2.25% this financial year, fall to 1.75% next year, and then rise to 2.25% the year after that. That suggests Australia will avoid a recession. Assuming that forecast comes true, wouldn't that suggest Chalmers had done a good job under difficult circumstances?
Yes, but due to economic conditions, maybe even Blind Freddy could have, done the same job. But it doesn't mean. And if the economy's going that well, why aren't we running surpluses? Why are we going into more debt? He's raising taxes on capital gains tax. He's cutting the fraud out of the NDIS. He still can't squeeze out a small surplus. What's going on? Why are they still spending so much money on everything else? If we cut 1% of the budget, that's $10 billion. So why can't we just go across every department and say, sorry, slash costs by 5%? Maybe some departments could be 10%, and others could only be 1 or 2%. But yeah, 5% across the board, that's $50 billion we'd be saving. And we'd be in a surplus then. So, it's keeps talking about making hard decisions. He was making the hard decisions to be able to shore up his vote. And that's essentially what they've done here. It's a political budget. It's a politics budget to be able to come further to the left by voting for the Greens, because the Greens have been banging on about getting rid of negative gearing benefits for years. So they just want to show that voter base, that younger, left-leaning, green voting voter base, that yes, they too can take action and cut back on negative gearing benefits. And that's all it is. And we've seen it in the polls that have already come out since the voter backlash. It's Albo's not even preferred prime minister at the moment in the first poll that came out.
You've made quite a few references to the idea that the government should be running a surplus, but cost of living pressures, Owen, they're getting worse rather than better. So wouldn't it be irresponsible for the government to be running a surplus in the current environment?
No, in the complete opposite, Nick. You got me lost. How could it be irresponsible? The irresponsible thing is to keep spending and pushing up inflation, which then pushes up pushes up interest rates, which then has more of an inflationary effect on the market. The government needs to be cutting spending at this point, so that the economy won't overheat, and even more so. So they want this economic growth of 2% roughly over the next few years. Maybe it needs to be 1.5%. If we can get, there's no point having 2% economic growth if we've got 4% inflation.
Well, I know Jim Chalmers and Anthony Albanese will be listening to this episode, very keen to get your feedback. It strikes me that they should be getting your feedback before they unveil the budget rather than afterwards. Because if they get your feedback beforehand, they can actually do something about it.
Well, I doubt they'd actually listen. So it's quite sad, really, to see our country at a point where they're trying to erode any incentive to get ahead as an individual, and to save, not waste your money, and actually invest what you've saved to provide yourself with a better future. They're just wanting everyone to be able to put it into those super funds, and that they can control through their union buddies, and invest the way that they want it to be invested. So, I think that's what they're really pushing for.
Now, just before we go, we're 4 weeks away from the next RBA decision. What do you think is going to happen? I'm predicting another rate rise.
At this stage, I don't know. We've had, 3 rate rises now in short succession. I think we really need to stay steady and see what happens with the next little while. So I'm pushing for a hold, and because we need to see how the market really reacts to not just the rate rises, but also this budget, and see what happens, because consumer confidence is really taking a hit at the moment.
Well, Michelle Bullock, now you know what to do. Owen, thank you very much for the chat. Looking forward to catching up again next week.
Thank you, Nick, and we will see you same time next week.